Hey, I'm Pastor Rhonda.
And I'm Pastor Seth.
You're listening to Growing Hope,
Living Faith.
Welcome back to Growing Hope, Living Faith. This is Season 2, Episode number 24. We are rolling right along. Goodness. And we are coming up on Labor Day weekend. By the time this is out, we will just about be there. Where did the summer go? Oh, my goodness.
I don't know. It has absolutely flown by. And I heard when I was younger that, when you get kids, time seems to fly a whole lot faster. And I never really doubted that, but it is definitely true. When you get kids, it just seems like the speed of life. It just flies by on such a deep level. And it's absolutely unbelievable. I am thankful for some very, very nice weather.
Me
so
too.
I was able to go flying this last Sunday night, and
good.
I didn't burn up in the air, which is good. Took my dad and took Walt, and so I went down to Gunnersville, Alabama, and landed at the airport down there, and then turned around and flew back.
Wow.
Did have one of my more scarier moments in an airplane.
What happened?
And so, or at least flying an airplane, that is. So we were flying, and we were heading out of Chattanooga, flying over Lookout Mountain. And so literally flew over Rock City. We flew over Covenant College. We're about 4,500 feet. And we get to the other side of Lookout Mountain, and we look around us, and there's parasailers and there's hang gliders around us. And that was pretty nerve-wracking. And so thankfully we saw them, and we were able to obviously steer away from them. But there's probably one, had to be half a mile to a mile off my left wing. And it was kind of looking right at me. And so, so that was kind of interesting. I've always kind of feared the potential of seeing hang gliders or parasailers. It was kind of crazy. So, but have you been enjoying the weather?
I have loved it. I was in Hiawassee yesterday and today and this morning. Oh my, it was so nice and cool. I'm so excited about it because I am not a hot weather person. But we did go to Dollywood last Saturday, and it was just starting to get cooler than it had been. I don't think I could have made it if it had been super, super hot, but we had so much fun at Dollywood. Had all the grandkids and my son and my daughter and their spouses, and
That's awesome.
We just had so much fun. And it was cool because I've talked a little bit about how this chaplaincy thing has really changed me, but every time the kids would say, "Mimi, will you ride this? Will you ride?" I thought, you know what? I've seen too many people that are not able. So guess what, Mimi? She's like, "Let's get wet on this water ride." But Rosie and I, we were riding this ride called the Wild Eagle, and it's one of those where your legs just kind of dangle. And it's really cool because the wheels of the roller coaster they're on the center, but where you sit, you're like on the wings of an eagle.
Oh, nice.
And I think about that when you talk about flying on the wings, but you look like there's nothing underneath you, and it looks like you're not on the track. Well, we had the first seat, Rosie, and she'll be 10 in December, and we were on the first seat, and there was nothing in front of us but the blue sky and the trees and everything. And when they opened the gate slowly for us to take off, and I may have told you this story Sunday, but our listeners haven't heard this.
Yeah, absolutely.
But as they opened the gate slowly and we started like creeping, it just takes off really quickly. But right before that happened, Rosie looks at me and says, "I'll see you in heaven, Mimi."
That's awesome.
I was like, "Oh my word." Yeah, it was so funny. Sorry, thanks for listening to that again. But
No, it's great. I love it.
it was so cool, and I'm so thankful that we had that chance. And now everybody's coming up to our house in Hiawassee. I think even our youngest one is going to get to come up, and we're planning to have some fun. And I have a high school reunion this Saturday, and I'm not telling you what year. Oh my word! But I'm looking forward to that.
That's
and again, instead of worried about being older, I'm just thankful that I'm here. It's a blessing to grow old.
Yeah,
So,
no, that's great.
Here we are.
That's awesome. Well, yeah, the weather has just been phenomenal, and so much so that I'm dreading, because I'm dread it's actually going to go back up before we actually get our for real cool weather. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think it was like 50 something degrees this morning when the kids went to school.
Yes, praise the Lord.
Oh, I loved it. I love it. I love it. I love it. And you don't have to feel bad about, letting your dogs go out, that they're, going to hyperventilate from the heat and all that kind of fun stuff. And so, yeah, no, it's been fantastic. I'm looking forward to that. Obviously, with cooler air means football season's here, which a lot of people are probably excited about that. And we did get a comment. I know we did get a comment on one of our posts. It did say Roll Tide. So to that commenter, I'll give you a firm Roll Tide back. And no, I said, I think I said Roll Tide. I said, but Pastor Rhonda may not appreciate this.
Well, I am not a real true blue fan of anybody. It just depends on who's playing who. If Tennessee's playing Georgia, I want Georgia to win. But if Tennessee playing Alabama, hate it. I want Tennessee to win. But if Alabama's playing Auburn, I want Alabama to win. So I'm just not very loyal to any sports team.
Well, that's all right. That's all right. So, but no, it's definitely a good season. So, which is good. I didn't tell you we're going to do this right here. I was going to do this, but I think we would be remiss as a faith-based podcast, not to say today that we are thinking about our Catholic brothers and sisters, and praying for you. That we're shooting this today. This morning there was a school shooting up in Minneapolis, and 2 kids. Essentially the school was in mass. It was a Catholic school. School was in mass. A person goes in and obviously creates a heinous act. And so many times, I think even in the church, we make this a political issue. And, I don't think we are going to look at this politically, but I think, the call for the Christian is to look at it through the eyes of Jesus and through the lens of Jesus. And I know it breaks Jesus' heart on such a deep level. And there's a lot of people that are hurting and a lot of people who are struggling. And it's just not the time or the place for people to try to make a stand on politics. And so I think that's the last thing we should do. But I think for us in the church, it should bring us to a place of truly crying out, God, where are you? How much more do we have to endure? How much more do we have to experience things like this? Because I know it breaks God's heart. I believe, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that it breaks God's heart. And so maybe for us as believers, it's looking beyond what we feel like our rights are, or what the answer to combat that is, according to the American way. How do we as the church, how do we step into this suffering that's going on, and try to shed the way of Jesus, the kingdom way, and die to the kingdom way, maybe above all other ways. I don't know. I just felt like we need to, as a faith-based podcast, I felt like it probably needed to be addressed. And like I said, we're praying for our Catholic brothers and sisters. It's definitely heartbreaking, and I just can't imagine what those families are going through right now.
Right, and it's bad that there was a shooting and there were physical injuries and wounds, and the stories are starting to come out, and they are heartbreaking. But what this also does is creates trauma for all of those that witness, and then also just fear of the same thing happening. And there's probably children everywhere, school children everywhere are afraid. And I know my granddaughter, she's not quite 10 yet, but she told me her number one fear is to be shot and shot at school. And, that's just sad to me that an innocent child knows how to hide from a shooter. And she was explaining how they were taught to put their arms above their heads and, to hide, and, these things that it just broke my heart to hear her articulate the plan for an active shooter. And I think this makes it, all school shootings are are horrific and they're awful. But the fact that these kids were in chapel or
Yeah.
mass just rips my heart to shreds. I went to a Christian school. I've been in chapel when I was in high school. It was Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I know what it's like to sit in Phillips Chapel behind stained glass, and that never entered our mind that someone would block us, with a 2x4 in so we can't get out and just start shooting us. And we are living in some crazy times, and I don't know what the answers are, and that's where you run the risk of getting political, but I know we can do better. I know we can get help for mental illness. We can do better that way. We can do better with the semi-automatic weapons. I don't even know what they're called, but we can do better. And that's my prayer, is that we would put our rights aside and just really do what's right and best for these kids and teachers and all that's involved. And for those parents that were directly affected today, we do pray for them and for their families. And there's just nothing else you can say, at this point, other than we're just so heartbroken.
Yeah, absolutely. Just a hard topic. And like I said, it's such a polarizing topic on such a deep level. And it's, when you pray for peace and you pray for, grace and you pray for a lot of those things, it's very, very, it's very hard. And like I said, I know there's probably going to be a lot of backstory that's going to continue to come out about the realities of maybe why this happened. And it's so easy to look at it with a critical eye. Once again, even as believers. But I think Scripture tells us not to on such a deep level. I think Scripture tells us to, just to be careful in our approach, in our thinking. Because the reality is everyone is a child of God, and whether we agree with lifestyles or not, but everyone's a child of God. And so, my hope and prayer for us as a church is we'll continue to lean into the reality of love and living love, in a lot of these really hard and difficult safety situations, because I believe love is a powerful thing. I believe, yes, we are living in difficult times, like you said, but love is a powerful thing, and it can change hearts, it can change minds, it can change a lot of things. And so so how do we continue to live into that, I think is something that we have to continue to wrestle with on such a deep level. It's tough. So sorry to divert us there. Like I said, we didn't even talk about that beforehand, having that conversation, but I felt like it was important as we were doing our introduction to at least address it to some degree, to some fashion. And like I said, we know the answer. We don't have the answers of how to stop this from happening on any deep kind of level. I wish I had answers, more concrete answers to say, it's this, it's this, it's this. But I think we got to keep praying for peace, and that people will experience the love of Jesus, maybe like they've never experienced it before. Right. Because that is the thing that changes.
Right. And when that happens, I feel like that's when we move into the mutual submission. What's best for you, instead of what's best for me. Yeah. And when we have all sides doing the same thing, like, let's do this, what's best for the kids, not me, not anybody else, but let's do what's best for them. I think that's where my heart longs, and I don't know if that's possible. I'd like to say that it is, but I don't know. I mean, it just looks pretty hopeless at this point. But we keep praying and we keep modeling, and we don't give up hope that that could happen.
It's good. It's good. Well, and I think a lot of what the passages really hit towards, I think there's a couple of different avenues that you can really take on some of these passages when it comes to the lectionary. But I think a lot of what these passages are hit on is this mentality of humility, which is very much needed in all situations, in all circumstances. And, we were talking before, and you said so many times we think of humility as kind of like a character trait or whatever. But humility really is an action. It takes on a whole life of its own. It's a way of life on such a deep level. And then it's also this other thought process that we've seen through it, through these passages which you brought up, is that God takes care of all of our needs. He won't necessarily take care of all of our wants, but he does take care of all of our needs. And I think those two mentalities, I think, do speak into, a lot of our experiences that we have in the world today, and a lot of the things that we see going on in the world today that, sometimes I think people may act out because their needs aren't met.
Right.
And I think there's potential, the response that people have to people who act out it oftentimes doesn't come from a place of humility if we're not very careful. And so I think these two things are very, very important in the day and age that we live in. It's important for us, and it's important for the believer of faith.
Right. And it's true that we can afford to be loving and generous and submissive to one another because we're never going to lose. He's, like you said, he's always going to take care of every single need that we have. And I loved all of the passages. It was hard to choose which one to zero in today to talk about. But, he really does supply everything that we need, and it is different than what we want, but he will, as long as we're, trying to live kingdom ways and his ways, he's going to continue to provide. So we can afford to give our love away. We can afford to be generous. We can afford to be humble and to submit to one another because we have his approval. Going to meet everything.
It's good.
Everything we need.
It's good. So, all right. I think we decided we're going to open up with a Proverbs passage.
Sure.
And there is a passage. Sorry, I just dropped something. I shouldn't be holding it, but I just dropped something. There is a passage this week that does come from the Apocrypha. And so if you're looking at the lectionary passages and you're like, man, I've never heard of that. It's called Sirach. And so it is actually one of the books that's in the Apocrypha. We, as Protestants, we don't necessarily consider the Apocrypha to be a part of our Bible, to be a part of our canon, but there are other traditions that do consider the Apocrypha to be a part of their Bible. And so just wanted to throw that out there. If you're reading through the lectionary passages for this week, like I said, you may see something and you're like, wait, what's that? I've never heard of that. That's essentially what is going on. But we are going to start with Proverbs 25, and it's just 2 verses. Proverbs is sometimes you can get really lost in Proverbs. Sometimes you'll read something and you're like, man, that really doesn't make sense. Other times it's like, that's spot on. But this one is once again, I feel like it's such a heart issue. But it reads like this. It's Proverbs 25, 6 and 7 reads like this. Do not put yourself forward in the king's presence or stand in the place of the great. For it is better to be told, come up here, than to be put lower in the presence of a noble. It's good.
That's embarrassing, isn't it?
It is. Yeah, absolutely. It can be. Once again, I think it can be very, very embarrassing on such a deep level. But it drives back and pushes back to this attitude is what's going to be our overall attitude of how we go about living life. Is it going to be in this place of achievement, right? Or this place of trying to put ourselves in a place of achievement or making ourselves look good to those around us so that those around us think that we are maybe better or higher than we ought to be? Or are we living this life in a way that like I said, we know we're here, God has blessed us. But I don't have to show who I am to other people. Or I don't, that's not going to be the thing that pushes me to the reality of how I go about living my life is what other people think and what other people, how they see me whenever I'm in a group of people or whatever. This really points and really begins to drive down to that on such a deep level, because I think all of us care about what people think about us.
We do. And I was thinking as you were talking about that, especially in our day and age. I mean, I know it's always been a problem, but I think in our culture today where we have social media and we see everybody's fake happy lives and they look perfect, and we start this comparison, and this country phrase that I've heard all my life, they're just eat up with it.
Yeah.
We just get, that's our number one goal, is to look important in front of other people.
Mhm.
And it's because we've compared ourselves, and it's so readily available to us. It's in the palm of our hand, where before, you'd have to see, you had to keep up with the Joneses when they were your neighbors, or people like that. But now it's like everybody lives their life, at least a perception of it, out
Right.
loud. And you've got people you went to school with, people you work with, your neighbors and strangers, that we're bombarded with an audience at all times, and we want to look good in that audience at all times. And why is it? And I think it's deeper than just wanting to look good, but it positions us to be able to manipulate and to achieve and to get ahead and to step on the backs of other people to get advanced. And we see that, I mean, that's a huge thing in our culture,
Yeah. Well, you think about what's the opposite of humility, and I think it's probably a lot deeper than just pride. I think there is this pride that we have, that we want to be seen a certain way, or to have influence, to, like you said, to have influence over decisions or people. And so I want to be careful, because I don't think necessarily pride's a bad thing. I think it gets a bad rap lots of times. I think taking pride in your work, taking pride in your journey, taking pride in your family, taking pride in things it's not a bad thing per se. But it's when we begin to elevate pride above humility, then that's where we begin to really have, I think, issues. And I think definitely the reality of this Proverbs passage is like you said, it's pushing to where you are going to be able to gain. It's you push yourself to a place of the ability to be able to be in the presence of the King, right? Like, to just think about being in the presence of the King, to be able to have that conversation. It's the things that you care about and the things that are important to you. You then have voice in with potentially someone who can actually do something about those things. And so it's when you begin to position yourself in that place, it's very important to understand and realize our motives, right? Because like you said, it's so easy for us to position ourselves and to chase after things, but not even realize, like you said, who we're stepping on to get there, or who we're pushing down to actually get there. And in this upside down kingdom that Jesus has taught us about and that we talk about so much, we just know that it's not the way of the kingdom. Like, it's just not. It is the way of the world. And it's so easy for us that as we're going through life and we see people's lives on Facebook and all these social media, whatever, it's easy for us, if we're not careful, to say, well, why am I not there? Why don't I have that? And what we don't realize more often than not is that what we actually see of people's lives is on, Facebook. Most of the time, it's not reality. Like it's not really true from any stretch of the imagination. And so, I think we've got to be very, very careful in how we approach, a lot of those things. And I think obviously the upside down kingdom, it dictates how we approach people as a whole.
Oh, I definitely agree. And Jesus had a lot to say about this. And it's found in Luke chapter 14. We'll read verse 1 and then skip down to verse 7 through 14. You want to read, or you want me to?
I don't care. I can if you want me to.
Okay, I will.
All right, go for it.
I got my glasses on tonight. I can
do it. Hit it.
On one occasion, when Jesus was going to the house of a leader of the Pharisees to eat a meal on the Sabbath, they were watching him closely. That just kind of gives me the creeps. They were watching him closely. When he noticed how the guests chose the places of honor, he told them a parable. When you are invited by someone to a wedding banquet, do not sit down at the place of honor in case someone more distinguished than you has been invited by your host, and the host who invited both of you may come and say to you, "Give this person your place." And then, in disgrace, you would start to take the lowest place. But when you are invited, go and sit down at the lowest place so that when your host comes, he may say to you, "Friend, move up higher." Then you will be honored in the presence of all who sit at the table with you. For all who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. Now, that's a verse you might want to underline and star like
Yes.
I have. I'm going to read it again. For all who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. He said also to the one who had invited him in, when you give a luncheon, I didn't notice that's who he said that to. He said to the one who had invited him, when you give a luncheon or a dinner, do not invite your friends or your brothers and sisters or relatives or rich neighbors, in case they may invite you in return and you would be repaid. But when you give a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, and the blind, and you will be blessed because they cannot repay you, for you will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous. I can't believe I've missed that. I thought he was telling this story to all of them, but no, he says to the host, like, you've got a banquet and you invited all these people, but next time you do this, don't invite all these people, invite the people. Am I seeing that right? Am I just not seeing that for the first time? Don't invite your friends or your brothers and sisters or your rich neighbors.
Well, this guy has already made it. You know, he's a leader in the Pharisee. And, you know, once again, like when you are in a position of power and a position of authority, you know, what do you do with your power and the authority that you have? You know, I think this passage, it speaks directly to that reality on a very, very deep level. And so essentially what Jesus is saying is like, you have power, you have money, right? You're able to throw these big parties, these extravagant parties. And so what are you going to do with that? Instead of using those as avenues, once again, Jesus was at this party, right? You know, like Jesus was here. So like, obviously Jesus had been invited to this party, and it would be interesting to know, like, was he in the place of honor? Was he not in the place of honor? You know, I mean, that's a pretty interesting conversation potentially be able to have. And like I said, this points back to even last week when we were talking about the Pharisees and how a lot of the Pharisees get bad raps. But I mean, he's at a house of one of the Pharisees. So I think, you know, he had good relationships with some of the Pharisees. I think not all of the Pharisees, but he had good relationships with some of the Pharisees. But he's like, listen, you've made it, right? Like, you're a leader. You have wealth. You have the ability to buy food and to buy all of this stuff. Man, what are you doing with all of those things that you have been blessed by God with? What are you doing with those things? Are you throwing parties so that you can get more power and you can get more wealth and you can have more influence and you can, man, or are you doing what you do for the sake of, like I said, for the kingdom, for the reality of reaching other people, of blessing other people, of loving other people, of showing people the way of God and the way of Jesus? Man, I think that's things that we should be struggling with on such a deep level, because we are blessed. I mean, we are blessed on such a deep level. And you may look at your life and, you know, you may say, well, look at my neighbor. They're doing a whole lot better than I. And like I said, I think this is where the whole comparison reality comes into place. And we just talked about this mentality is like, that's not what we're called to do. We're not called to compare ourselves to others, but we take the blessings that God gives us, and their blessings are not meant for us to continue to build bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, more and more and more blessings. The blessings that God gives us are so that we can bless other people. Yeah. And how we go about doing that is very, very important, I think, in the eyes of Jesus.
Yeah, and I think he has said the same thing over and over. You know, I was thinking our podcast, I'm going to say the same things over and over.
Yeah.
But, Jesus, I keep thinking about that parable about building bigger barns,
Yep.
so I can have more stuff. And, he does bless us to give away. And that's why I love seeing that theme in all the passages this week, because he does not ever let us go
Mm,
lacking. I mean, he will take care. So we can afford to be generous, and we can afford
mm,
to help others. And those are the people that need it most. These are the people that are unable to give anything back. So many times we focus on those people that will give us something that we need, but
yeah.
I mean, who he lists here, they're incapable of giving back.
Mm,
And so it's this picture of no strings attached, and these are the people that you need to bring in and to put them in a place of honor, because they can't do anything for you. And I think that's the whole picture when you bring it into our context of this whole idea of wanting to be in places of honor. It's so that we can get something.
mm,
It's so that we can get a higher status, or we can get maybe a better job. I mean, we
yeah.
stand on the backs of people. But the whole thing is, God's like, you don't have to worry about any of that. You can take the lowest place and be humble, and then when you have the power to help someone else, give it all away. Give it,
Mm,
because I'm never going to let you go without.
it's good. I wonder, as you were sitting there talking, I was just kind of thinking, maybe a better opposite of humility is lack of contentment,
Yeah.
because we're not content with where God has us, and we're not content
Mm.
with the things that we have in life. And when we're not content, then it's a whole lot harder to live a life of humility.
I agree.
And so, man, I think contentment is just, it's all over the Gospels on such a deep
Oh,
level. But it's also beyond the Gospels. It's all over the New
Paul.
Testament. Yeah. Living a life of contentment, that just being okay with where God has you is such a hard truth. I mean, we talk about these things, but we struggle with it. At least I'll say I struggle with these things
I do too.
just as much, as everybody else. But I think that's why it's important for us, to have these conversations. But yeah, lack of contentment, I think, leads us so many times to places that we sometimes we don't even realize it, but it causes us, I think, to push others down so that we
Right.
can be raised up. And that's
Yeah.
that's hard to hear, because, like I said, it's so easy for us to look around, right? Look around, and our friends
Right.
have the boats, and they have
Mm.
the campers, and they have, you name it, they have all of those fun things. And so how do
Right.
we, as the people of God, how do we live a life of contentment in the realities of where we're at? And like I said, it's not easy. It's one of the hardest things I think we can do
Right.
as followers
It
of
is
Jesus.
hard. It is hard, but I do believe that Jesus doesn't ask us to do anything he wasn't willing to do himself.
It's good.
And I keep thinking about Philippians, where he says that we are to have that same attitude of humility that Jesus had. And though he was equal with God, he lowered himself and became a humble servant, even and obedient, even to the point of death on a cross. And if the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords and the Creator and Sustainer, there is no one in this world or other world. There is no person that's more important than him. Christ is it. I mean, he is the most important. There's no body that comes close. And if he can submit himself to the process of becoming human and limited and walking the face of this earth and putting other people before him, the most important person that's ever walked the face of the earth, if he can do that, then what's my problem? Why can't I give up my seat for someone else? Or why would I not put other people ahead of me? When I think about that, having the exact same attitude that he had, and that was the attitude of humility. And again, and it's not thinking poorly of yourself. It's just not thinking too highly of yourself, thinking of others above yourself. It's not that we should beat ourselves down because we are fearfully and wonderfully made. He tells us in Psalm 139 that we are, reflecting God's image, and we are all worthy of dignity and love. But it's also remembering that so is everyone else. Everyone else is reflecting the image of God, and they are worthy of dignity and love and respect. And like you said, it's all through Scripture. Submit to one another. I mean, it's Paul. Whatever state I'm in, I will be content. It's everywhere, all over Scripture. But I think it's so unnatural for us unless we are living in step with the Holy Spirit and allowing Him to shape us and mold us and lead us and guide us and direct us in those kind of lifestyles in that kind of way, because it doesn't really come natural unless we are being led by Him to do that. But He is our example, and He doesn't expect us to do it all on our own, and He doesn't expect us to get it right without His help.
Such a good word. I'm going to give that the last word, I think. Just something I think for all of us to reflect on such a deep level. Man, this is such a hard conversation and a hard concept. But like I said, I think as we mature in our faith, and I think it's the ultimate sign, or a big sign of maturity in faith, is humility on such a deep level. Yeah. And so my hope and prayer for you and for all of us is that we'll continue to mature in our faith on such a deep level that humility will be the way of life, and not humility for self-gain, because I think sometimes people try to be humble or try to have humility for their own self-gain. That's not what Jesus is talking about. But man, that true humility of not thinking higher of ourselves than we ought, but realizing that we're all in this together. We're all on the same playing field. And it's such a good word. So appreciate your word there. And if you have any comments, questions, concerns, ideas, or whatever, we would love to hear from you.
We'll be better about responding.
Yeah, absolutely. So absolutely.
And we also have a Facebook. I think I just messed you up. I'm sorry, I interrupted you. We have email at growinghopelivingfaith@gmail.com.
That's
and
right.
We have a Facebook page.
Yeah, it's Growing Hope Living Faith Podcast. And so you can reach out to us on those through those avenues. And like I said, if you have prayer requests, anything, just know that we love you, that we're praying for you. You're not alone in this journey. Hey, God loves you above all else. So thank you so much for listening in, and pray and hope you have a great rest of your week and a great Sunday. Grace and peace. God bless. Bye-bye.